Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sue Schormans, and wherever you are in the world, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to focus on part 2 of my book, Sink Then Swim: How to Survive Life's Most Stressful Situations When Living Abroad. And part 2, what does part 2 focus on? Well, the title is, give you a clue, Dive Deep into Who You Really Are. So in part 2, there are 2 chapters, and the 2 chapters look at what your values are, and 2, what your strengths are, and why your values and your strengths are so important. So diving deep into who you really are looks at what makes you, what makes me, and really why that is so important in every aspect of life, whether we live abroad or not. And the real point here is when you realize your values and you realize your strengths and you utilize those, you put them into action, you are living life according to who you are. You are living life as your real, authentic self. And I can't tell you enough how powerful and how important that is. So that's why this forms a part of the book. It really is so important because it enables you to manage change effectively. It enables you to manage living abroad, what living abroad throws at you, and it enables you to survive life's most stressful situations when living abroad more effectively. So knowing who you are is critical. Yeah. So let's, what I'm going to do today is going to share with you a bit of the content of each of the chapters within part 2. And I'm going to share with you what the learnings are that you will take away from each of those chapters. And finally, I'm going to end on what those chapters actually meant to me as I was writing that part of the book. So let's start with chapter 3. Chapter 3 is titled Crystal Clear Waters, and it focuses on your values. What are your values, why they're important to you, where they come from, etc. So your values are what are important to you in life. Not just important, but what's critically important to you. What would you absolutely not compromise on? Or should not compromise on? Because we do at times. I explain that a bit later. So things like what you spend most of your time on, what you spend most of your money on are clear indicators of what your values are. So I'll give you an example. A lot of my money goes on books. I like to read. And what lies behind that is that I like to learn. And what lies behind that is I like to share the learning with others. Hence the reason why I'm sat in front of my camera right now, sharing information on YouTube with you. So the underlying value behind me spending money on buying books is like to learn and like to share my learning with others. Simple. That's my value. So it's not just looking at what you spend your most money on, but what does that tell you about yourself? What is it that you value? Also, what you spend most of your time on. What is it, and what does that tell you about you? That's what the underlying point is with regard to identifying your values. So in this chapter, we look at values, what's important to you, what's critically important to you, why realizing your values is so important, particularly in just life in general, but particularly when you're living abroad and also when you're dealing with life's most stressful situations when living abroad. Also, this chapter looks at what happens when you violate your values, when you take on board other people's values, when you take on board other countries' values. So you've got your own values here on the one hand, and there are values of other people and other countries here, and you start to dip into these and you kind of start to eat away at them. What happens to your own values? Yes, you can take on board some of those values, but it's really important that you maintain the values that are absolutely critical to you. So what happens when you violate some of those values and you take most of those from other people and other countries on board? What happens? And the other thing that's shared within this chapter is how critical values are in preventing you losing yourself. So this bit about, okay, here's my values, here's the values of other people, other countries. If I take on board all of these and I forget the values of who I am, what happens? Well, you're violating your own values and you are losing yourself. You then become a former shadow of the real you. I become a former shadow of the real Sue. Where has she gone? I lost her, in the process, while I'm taking on board other values. And this can absolutely happen when you live abroad, particularly when you're dealing with culture shock and attempting to integrate into a new country and new ways of doing things. So that's chapter 3, Crystal Clear Waters, Understanding Your Values and the Importance of Them. Then move on to chapter 4 in the book, part 2, which is titled Swimming Strokes. And here we look at your strengths. And your strengths are put simply, what you are good at, and really importantly, what you enjoy doing. So it's not just about what you're good at, because I can be really good at something, but you know what? Oh my gosh, it drains my energy. Then I don't enjoy using it. So it's not really a strength. It's something that I'm good at and I can practice and do it, but it doesn't give me energy. It doesn't motivate me. So your strengths are things that you are good at and that you enjoy utilizing, and actually that you use them. Yeah, those are what your strengths are, because if you don't use them, then they weaken and they can fall into a weakness over time. So it's what you're good at and what you enjoy using. And within this chapter, we look at why realizing your strengths is so important. Particularly when dealing with change, living abroad, and those stressful situations when living abroad. And also how your strengths, some of your strengths can actually compensate for your weaknesses, which is really useful to know. Because, think about that interview question that so many of us have been asked in the past, and I actually asked it as a human resources professional. So tell me about your strengths, tell me about your weaknesses, and we all go, oh my, what is it that I'm weak at? What am I not so good at? Well, here you can be really smart and say, well, you know what, this is my weaknesses, but these are my strengths that I utilize to compensate for my weaknesses. So in this chapter, we look at what your strengths are that can compensate for your weaknesses. Really quite a good thing to know and to realize. So those are the 2 chapters and the contents of them. What you will take out of these 2 chapters, what you will learn are what values and strengths are and what they aren't. Where they originate, where do they actually come from? Were they there at birth? Yes, well, some of the values and your strengths will be there from birth. They will come from your family. You will then learn new ones from teachers, from your work colleagues, from your friends, etc. And when you move abroad to a new country, the new ways of doing things in your new land. You will also actually learn whether they fluctuate over time, and yes, they will. Remember the adage of some things you will take on board, new values, new strengths you will take on board as you integrate into a new country, and hopefully those will be the values and the strengths that you really do want to take on board. You're not following the sheep and doing things in order to fit in that compromise and violate who you are. You'll also learn what happens when you violate your strengths and your values. You'll also realise your own values and strengths. So there are swimming lessons within both chapters that ask you questions to really get to the bottom of what your values and your strengths are. You'll identify also, as I mentioned earlier, which of your strengths will compensate for your weaknesses. So there's lots of learning that comes out of part 2 of the book. diving into who you really are and why it's important. But what did this part actually mean to me as I'm scribbling away? What came to light? Well, absolutely lots of things. First of all, the absolute true importance, the vital, critical importance of knowing what your values and your strengths are. But importantly, not only knowing what they are, but utilising them every single day, and being therefore your true authentic self. So important. The other thing that came to light is that there are many theories out there that look at the integration journey and how to do it effectively. And you kind of think about this when you think about your neighbours and your friends in a new country that say, well, you've not really integrated well, have you? And you've not really learnt the language well enough yet, etc. And this immediately made me think about the phrase, which is, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So here I am off to Italy and I'm in Rome and I should be copying and doing exactly what the Romans are doing. And that's all well and good, because when we are in a new country, it's important to respect the cultural norms, the values, the customs, the ways of doing things. But there is a fine line and you need to balance things. You need to feel that you fit in, but at the same time, you need to also be feeling, well, actually, I'm not losing myself in the process here. So yes, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, but don't lose yourself in the process. And that really came to the fore as I'm writing this story, this part of the book, part 2. Because for a long time I've known who I am. I've been very self-aware, but there have been times when I have not lived life according to my values. I have not effectively used my strengths, and it's been very uncomfortable. It's been difficult. I've made life difficult for myself. So I'll give you a short example of that, and it's a very simple example, but it really goes to the heart of values. So, for example, when I lived in Norway, I would catch the bus. And when I first caught the bus, I was like, well, you say hello to the bus driver. But I noticed that other people just didn't do that. So I changed and I didn't say hello to the bus driver, but it didn't feel right. And I did it for many, many years, along with other changes that I made while I was living there. And I was like, where is Sue in the process here? Sue has gone into hibernation. She's become a shadow of her former self, and it didn't feel right at all. So one day I woke up and I was like, I'm done with all this. I need to bring Sue back. Where is Sue? I need to put those values back in place in this body, and I need to act and behave in accordance with what I value and what I'm good at in life. So the next time I got on the bus, there I was, smiling at the bus driver, saying hello, went and sat down, and whew, what a great feeling that was. And I've just done that now and I've got goose pimples running through me because I was being true to who I am. And importantly, I got a smile from the bus driver, a bit of an acknowledgement. So it was definitely a win-win for both parties. Just a simple thing like that, not violating your values, it's not about not fitting in totally, but not losing who you are and not becoming a shadow of your former self. So that was really important, and that's what I learned as I'm writing that part of the book. So important to remain true to yourself. Yes, fit in. Yes, do as the Romans do, but only to a certain degree that you don't lose who you are. Maintain your own identity, because at the end of the day, we are all unique. Yes, there are similarities. We behave in ways that are according to the culture of the country that we live in and our family and our upbringing, etc. But we are all individuals at the end of the day. We've got our own identity, our own uniqueness. The other thing that came to light here is that when you don't live life according to your values and your strengths, whether that's totally or partially, doesn't matter. Hopefully it's not totally, but it might be partially. Your behaviour changes. You get totally frustrated, and what you are getting frustrated with is yourself, not the situation. You're getting frustrated with yourself because you're not acting in accordance with who you are. And this can happen when you live abroad, and yeah, you're managing change in various ways. So it's so important that you are living according to your values. You are working with your strengths to manage change in life, to manage change when you're living abroad, and to manage and survive life's most stressful situations when you're living abroad. So the frustration that comes about also leads to things taking longer than they should or would when you are being your authentic self. And the other thing is that you will fail more than you succeed. And there is nothing, me saying here, there is nothing wrong with failing in life, because we learn more when we learn from our failures in life. But when we are violating who we are, we could be much more successful much more quickly. So yeah, that was a huge learning that came out of the chapter. Not the chapter, the part 2, covering values and strengths. So the reality is, where you can't deal with change effectively, you can't deal with living abroad effectively, you can't possibly deal with life's most stressful situations when living abroad, when 1, you don't know who you are, and 2, you are not utilising your values and strengths effectively in life. So it's so important that you know who you are. When you know who you are fully armed, fully equipped to be able to deal with all those changes in life. So that's part 2, an explanation of what's in there and what it meant to me, what came to light for me. So that's it, part 2. Please like, share, comment and subscribe. I would very much appreciate that. And if you don't know what to put in the comment box, let me suggest something. Let me suggest you put a heart in there. Yeah? Put a heart in there, because when you know who you are, your true authentic self, you will love yourself. You will love yourself entirely. And when you love yourself, you can then love others as well. So let's see a number of hearts in the comment box below the video. Thank you for doing that. Commenting, liking, sharing, subscribing. So that's it on this one. That's part 2 of the book. Part 3, we will be diving into life's most stressful situations when living abroad, from dealing with the culture of a new country, death of a relative, divorce, separation, ill health, and also finding work. So that's in the next video. Hope to see you there. Look forward to seeing you there, should I say. So that's it for now. Bye for now. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.